Welcome to The Screen Queen, the show where I'll be talking about your favorite show or your favorite movie. You'll just have to find out what you're about to know. This is your Screen Queen, your host, Samantha Parrish. Hello and welcome back to the show. Merry Christmas, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in to the final episode of the Christmas series on The Screen Queen. So it's come to this. We started the series with a Rennie Harlan Christmas action movie, and we end on a Rennie Harlan Christmas action movie. I guess this was one heck of a way for me to get into the Christmas spirit. It has to start the same way, it has to end the same way. So I've talked a lot about Die Hard in sprinkling snippets throughout the entirety of the Christmas series. So I do find it a perfect parallel that I've mentioned the movie in every single episode, and now we talk about one of the sequels of the blockbuster hit that changed action movies forever. So how come people don't remember it? Even me, who loves the Die Hard series, well, the first three movies with a absolute thriving force, and yet I don't remember the movie. I remember watching this when I was 12 and just went on by. But of course I was 12. I wasn't really going to understand a lot of it because I was so enamored by the action. And then years later watching it, I'm still lost. I don't know how the hell I sat through something and don't remember it. There are some lines that go and there's some certain action pieces, but some core elements of the film aren't memorable as opposed to its predecessor that had many memorable scenes that people still recite to this day. This was a film that people weren't expecting, but no one really said anything bad about it. So what is it about Die Hard 2 that people don't remember, but they also don't dislike? Die Hard was a film that people weren't expecting to be good, so when it surpassed people's expectations, it was amazing and phenomenal, became a popular film. So why is it that it became a popular film and people did not want a sequel? Usually when you see something so popular, it's like, God, give me a sequel, I want more! Maybe people already had their expectations just drained out and they didn't really have any more expectations. So when Die Hard 2 came out, it was sort of like a unexpected surprise that people didn't really know what to do with or to deal with. And naturally, they're like, alright, John McClane's back, let's go see him in theaters. And it got great reviews, and it actually made more money than the first Die Hard. And yet, people don't remember it. When we watch a film, we think about what we're going to take away from it. How was the impression? What happened? And obviously, it made such a strong impression that it made more money than the original. And people did like the film. There's nothing bad that people say about it, but people aren't really saying anything about it. And now here I am, trying to scratch my brain to figure out why is it that people don't talk about Die Hard 2. And I came up with some very interesting hypotheses that we're about to dive into. One of the very strange things about Die Hard 2 is the fact that Die Hard is a sequel. Now, that doesn't make any sense, right? Like, well, wait, that's the first movie. How's the first movie a sequel? Well, Die Hard comes from a sequel novel. There's a series that came out in the 1950s or 60s called The Detective with Frank Sinatra. And then people were waiting in anticipation for a sequel that came 30 years later with Nobody Lasts Forever. And by the time they got the novel done, and naturally people want to see the sequel movie, but 30 years have gone past and the original star, Frank Sinatra, was already too old. Can you see him having to do all that shit in Die Hard? I can, but he's old. He can't do it. But they were contractually obligated to ask him, hey, do you want to be a Nobody Lasts Forever? And he said, and I quote, I'm too old and I'm too rich. Good words, Frank, good words. So, knowing that they had to move on without Frank Sinatra, they were kind of scratching their heads knowing they have something that's going to be technically new. They're going to be introducing an audience to Roderick Thorpe's novels. I mean, yes, it's still a Die Hard series, but to its core, it's a Roderick Thorpe novel. It's a Roderick Thorpe series. So, When they created Die Hard, they were wondering how they were going to make it. They redid the entire storyline, and it's actually been covered on the show The Movies That Made Us, when the production was talking about adapting and changing Nobody Lasts Forever into Die Hard, making it a solo movie, then a sequel to The Detective. Which sounds great, it treads new territory. However, people weren't on board with Die Hard. People were shocked to find out the guy from Moonlighting was going to be an action star. All the expectations were extremely low. And then to everyone's surprise, they accidentally loved Die Hard, and it became a popular movie. But then they also felt, well, what else is there? I feel like we got a nice end cap with him in the limo with Holly going to, fix his marriage. Looking at the film, they really did go big or go home. If your first film was in a building, what is the next place that's going to have a lot more danger and a lot less escape plans? Well, an airport. That automatically ups the tension to wonder how John McClane's going to get through this. It almost feels a little bit silly knowing, oh my god, one man's going to save a whole frickin' airport? Well, he does. There's a charm to John McClane that we believe in him, just like the other various action hero movies that we've had. You could have any stupid, dangerous crap going on, knowing it would not happen in real life, but you believe it because you believe in your hero. There are many things that happen in Die Hard 2 that seem over the top and silly, but you love it because John McClane was able to get through it. It lets you have that tension and that adventure, and John McClane allows you to see that, and it's amazing. Bruce Willis, in his heyday and until his retirement, he was a remarkable addition to the action genre, and he forever changed action movies. But there were some concerns about how Die Hard 2 was going to be executed. There's a major evolvement of John McClane's character, and this is the perfect opportunity, but how is his character going to flow through the rest of the film? That is a valid concern. And with most action movies, you kind of feel like you get the film formula down if there's some familiar things just in different places. Like, oh, this is our new sidekick, this is our new villain, this is our new place, this is our new pain in the ass, this is our new captain, this is our new threat. Understandable, where it kind of feels like it's just trying to be the same thing. However, it doesn't. This is very good movie math that the first film was taking place in a building. Now the next film was at an airport. You kind of have to up the danger for more possibilities of what's going to happen, and you kind of have to limit the ways our hero is going to be able to escape. And there are many moments in the film where you're like, oh shit, John's not going to make it. He had plenty of opportunities in the first film with how he was able to escape and get through things, but he's in the middle of nowhere, and he doesn't really have a lot of accessibility, and he is the character that is basically the boy who cried wolf. In the first film, it played to the advantage that no one could trust John because they didn't really see him, they didn't know who he was, and he had to pivot it across that he's a good guy without having to reveal he's an officer. It really is a smart movie with how you're able to address things and make things read between the lines. But now in the second film, after the critical acclaim of how he saved Nakatomi Corporation in Christmas Eve, for Christmas Eve date, same thing, it all takes place on Christmas. Now he's the character that no one believes because he's famous. He was in interviews and talk shows about how he saved Nakatomi Corporation, and he's one to not really accept compliments, which does feed into his self-depreciative character, but it's still very fucking annoying that there's a lot of proof that John has, and yet the airport security won't believe him because he's famous. And that's kind of a very strange way to dismiss a character. I mean, if someone were to say, hey, we got a problem here, wouldn't you listen to the person that says we have a problem here and actually hear them out? But it just feels like it's like a forced plot. That's like my own, well, one of my few complaints I have about Die Hard 2. I do have to give the credit that it is something different that does add to the danger, which makes John McClane's life 10 times harder, and you see the chutes and hurdles that he's going through just to get Holly's plane to land. And that is an admirable thing, but at the same time I can't fault it too much because it's a sequel trying to do something different. If it was doing the same thing where John McClane was on a radio and there were some people that kind of believed him with kind of like an arm's width, that would be just like the first movie. I just wish that they could have handled the boy that cried wolf thing a little bit easier, especially when there was one character that believed him. There was a part in the film where the terrorists were attacking and one of the airport workers now officially believes McClane. But that's a little early on in the movie, and yet it still continues to happen again. And I'm sitting there like, wait a minute, why isn't that guy helping? If he gave a full report talking about everything, then how come he's not helping everyone believe, knowing that you have a second witness? That would make it a bit more plausible to know, okay, maybe McClane is right. Maybe there is something going on with the planes around here. But maybe that kind of adds the tension. Sometimes in tension, it will make things a little bit harder to logically believe someone or take the chance to believe someone. It's a bit of a divided plot point. But the one thing that I was thinking about with this film that I wonder if my listeners out there see this too, if you have seen Die Hard 2, is I think the problem with the movie is that it goes too fast. Now, that seems kind of strange to say. Action movies are supposed to be fast, but they're not supposed to be so fast to the point that you couldn't process the plot. The first film did have fast moments, but it was like you had to digest the first slow moments of the film and then you get right into the action. You have all of your game players, you have your bad guys, you have your good guys, you have your side characters, and it still held on to these characters long enough to get to know them, to know what's going on, to connect everything together. From the get-go, it's way too fucking fast. From the get-go, it does not waste any time. It goes way too fast. Kind of like a soccer mom trying to get her kids in the car so they can make it a soccer practice kind of fast. Like, come on, hustle, 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 let's go. First thing, Die Hard 2, Die Harder. John McClane getting his car towed. John McClane getting into a fight with the cop. John McClane going to an airport. I'm like, whoa, 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 whoa. What just happened? You see how that would be a little bit hard to process? Even the fight scenes cut way too quickly from the bad guys going to John McClane, going to the airport, going back to the airport guys, going back to John McClane. It's like, wait, whoa, 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 where am I? What's going on? I don't know where we are. Which is honestly kind of a bad thing for a film. We didn't really have the chance to process a lot of it, and that might be a reason as to why people don't remember the film, because they don't remember what they watched because it went by so quickly. The sad part is that there are some really good elements to this film. I do like the repertoire that the airport guys have with each other where they want a safe airport. That they have that established very well about the professionalism and the concern. That really does give a good recognition to the people that work in airport security to be prepared for their worst nightmare. This also goes for, like, the airport cops are just trying to do their job. And there are some very good actors that play the cops in there, but they have their lines delivered so fast and they cut away so quickly that we couldn't really get to know them. If you look at, I'm trying not to make too many comparisons to the first Die Hard, but Sergeant Al Powell. We see him getting Twinkies at a gas station. Anytime we saw Sergeant Powell on screen, we got to know him a little bit more and to know his role in the whole movie, as he became the most important officers doing things better than the actual FBI or the other police detectives, or sergeants, lieutenants, everything. One guy. Now we have a new police officer that isn't like Sergeant Al Powell, which is a good thing, so he wouldn't have a copy-paste of Sergeant Al Powell, but I didn't really get to know Carmine that well. I know he's got a brother, I know he doesn't like McClane, he's giving McClane a hard time, and that's it. The sad thing is that the actor's giving it his all, and I haven't really gotten to see more of him. But that brings me to my next point is, I think this film goes so fast to the point that I don't even remember the villains. And that's kind of the whole point of a Die Hard film is, who's John McClane gonna fight? And they do up the ante and we have two villains this time, but I don't remember either of them. I hate to go back to the first film. Actually, no, I don't hate to go back to the first film. I love the first film. But when you have a first movie, how is it going to equal its predecessor? It can be better than the first one. We've had a lot of sequels that we can say are better than the predecessor, but it has to live up to the expectations we had from the original. Look at Die Hard. There were no expectations from it. So now that people have expectations, it's going to be a little tough where they feel like they're going to be let down from something that they were already prepared to be let down for. That automatically makes the tension of the success of this film to arise. With all the danger that is exposed in Die Hard 2, it does seem like a very interesting idea to have two villains so you have like a double cross. And you won't know, it becomes the biggest plot twist that two of the villains are actually working together. And it does have a good payoff. And the actors that play the villains, William Sadler and John Amos, are acting their asses off. But they weren't given enough material. We didn't get to know these villains. We look at Hans Gruber from Die Hard. We're never gonna have another villain like Hans Gruber, but we got to know Hans Gruber. There was time away from John McClane to be able to know what Hans Gruber is up to, his motives, his personality. He's like a sophisticated Shakespearean-like villain, which probably explains everything because Alan Rickman was a very good theater actor. Now let's look at the bad guys here. They're played by TV actors. That's a hell of an accomplishment to jump from TV to movies and to play a villain that you take seriously. You don't see John Amos as the dad from Good Times. I saw him as the bad guy in Die Hard 2. It even took me a while to realize when I watched Good Times, I'm like, oh my god, that's the bad guy from Die Hard 2. Here's the sadder thing. I didn't even remember his name in the movie. He was just the bad guy from Die Hard 2. Enough to be memorable that I will know him from something, but I wouldn't know the reason why he was there. There was not a huge impression as a bad guy. He just did bad things, and that was about it. Hans Gruber had a lot of layers to him, despite the fact that you just know he's a bad guy. We're not really going to be rooting for him, but we are intrigued and impressed by him. We're not too intrigued by Stewart and Grant from Die Hard 2. They're just, what's it called, like Broken Arrow villains, which, yeah, that's okay. It works for Die Hard 2, it works for the plot, but we unfortunately didn't really get to know more about them. We were able to learn more about Hans Gruber through news bulletins and from other people, and it does seem very ambitious to have two villains in there to give more to John McClane to work around and to work with to stop two bad guys, but that's also the double-edged sword. You have two bad guys. In a lot of certain films, specifically superhero films, that's kind of the writing on the wall for a disaster film. It's like that saying, too many cooks, get out of the kitchen. We weren't able to get enough material out of Grant or Stewart. We knew enough about them, but we didn't get to know more about them. We just were kind of given a small amount to go from there, and then we go back to John McClane having to stop the bad guys. We weren't given a proper backstory, and sometimes you can have a proper backstory, and sometimes you don't need a proper backstory, but they just kind of fell a little bit flat, and it's not their fault. It just was just a tough call having to have two villains for a movie and make it work to the best of the ability of the director and the actors. But that wasn't the only problem that happened with the pace of the plot. The plot required snow. So, with me being a native of Virginia, the one thing that I loved about this movie is that it takes place in Virginia. On paper, it takes place in Virginia. Location-wise, it does not take place in Virginia, despite having cars with clear Virginia license plates. Rennie Harlin's grand idea of how he wanted to present Washington, D.C. was by filming it in Washington. Like, okay, I see you, Rennie. You got an idea? You're going with it? And they get to Washington to find it snowless at a solid 50 degrees. And when I read that, finally putting the pieces together, that they filmed it in Washington as opposed to Washington, D.C., I thought, well, that's kind of accurate. Washington and Virginia have something in common now, that they don't have the weather that you think that it's going to have. Having snow in Virginia is about as spot on as having a good relationship. Like, it's kind of rare. Doesn't happen that often. So, poor Rennie Harlan's out of luck that he gets to Washington to film this movie that's supposed to take place in Virginia, and there's no snow. So he had to go out of his way to 3 different locations to find snow. He went to Denver, Colorado, Michigan, and California, and basically had to just pack up everything once the snow melted in order to go to the next location that would have snow. So they literally had to have snow on the go. But then again, looking at that with how the production went, maybe that explains why everything is so damn fast and why things had to be so quickly, is they were on a time limit. They only had the snow for a limited amount of time. They actually had to make fake snow for a majority of this film, especially during some of the plane fight scenes, just so you could see more of like a snowstorm, because on the outside there's not really much going on. They're just trying to use up what they could to make this really look like it's a really bad snowy day in Washington, D.C., Virginia, when it's not. But still, I gotta admire the tenacity that he wanted to make sure that this was going to be a weatherly accurate movie. You're getting a snowy movie, you're gonna watch a snowy movie. And it would look a little bit weird for John McClane to run in the snow and then all of a sudden, like, run out of snow. That would just be kind of weird, having no snow on the go. But another really good selling point to this film that really works is the tension. And I'm not talking about the action you have going on, I'm talking about the good guy versus the bad guy. What we loved in the first Die Hard is still present in the second Die Hard film, for knowing what's John McClane's new foe going to be like and how does he interact with them. This is truly what makes John McClane's character very layered and evolved, is how he's able to deal with these different foes. We see that he was able to handle Hans Gruber, and now here's a new bad guy, and they're kind of doing the same thing like you saw in the first Die Hard movie, which was the social chicken method of trying to figure the other person out. Except at this point, they already know they don't like each other. They know from the get-go that the other person is up to something. And that's what makes this a really remarkable on-screen tension. But it also helps with the fact that there was real on-screen tension going on. John Amos and Bruce Willis despised each other. Oh my goodness. I mean, shoot. Even though it's not good to have, it really fed into the scenes because of how much they didn't like each other, and that's what their characters are supposed to do, is not like each other for specific reasons. Everything about their scenes feels like 2 schoolboys about to get into a fight. John Amos did go on to say that he really did not like working with Bruce Willis, and it just made him so mad, and he would constantly do things to irk Bruce Willis. There's even things that he said on the set where he would go, "You got that, Bruce?" And it's like, "Oh, yippee ki yay, man! Oh God, oh dear." So I guess it wasn't good times on set. I do feel like with the way this film goes so fast that you do miss a lot of stuff. However, there's some stuff that's not really the film's fault that you miss it on purpose. There were some references and Easter eggs in the film that does explain some stuff without having to give you the plot of what's been going the last 2 years. Let's look at Holly and John. The whole thing is they're trying to fix their relationship. I miss this, even though this was bluntly said, that John McClane declares himself an LAPD officer, not an NYPD officer. It's the only film that he does that, and with that mentioned, it does show that he moved back to California to be with his wife and fix his marriage. We've all been waiting to see what's going to happen with that, and we kind of did see what happened with that. Just with him mentioning that he's a part of the LAPD now. He wants to be with his wife. He's not making her go to New York City anymore. But then let's also look at Holly. In the first film, she is obviously a leader, with the way that she was able to help everyone get through the hostage situation and have everything with gusto and gravitas and bravada to challenge someone like Hans Gruber and be like, "You want this? I want this. Let's work together and get it done." Natural leadership skills. On the plane, she's holding a folder that says Nakatomi Corporation. So she probably took over Nakatomi Corporations, or she is still in the same stage of working her way up in the corporation if it did go to someone else. We still know that she has a great job. It's those subtle little touches that goes a long way into a film that does piece things together. What exists in this film as the faults does have something that will kind of counter it in a way to make up for what we didn't see here. So not having to have everything handed to us for this film is a sign of good writing, that they do want to let us know what's been going on, even if it's not said. Those are some of the best things to see in a film, because it's like world building. You get to see more of their world. You get to see more of John McClane and what's been going on. And having the folder and the mention to LAPD, it does let you know what's been going on the last 2 years. That's what truly makes John McClane feel like an everyday Joe that you got to know. But the one thing that I'm very surprised that I missed, the Terminator was in this movie. I'm not talking about I'll be back. I'm talking the T-1000. I was too young to know who Robert Patrick was, and then by the time I found out who he was, it threw me for a loop on the recent time that I watched this, that the T-1000 was in the movie. I know that the film has to work fast because John McClane is literally racing against time to defeat a bunch of terrorists, and he's in a cramped space, so you can't really see too much. But still, it would have been nice to at least get to focus on Robert Patrick a little bit more to register him. When people get famous for a certain role, because now Robert Patrick is forever known as the T-1000. But knowing this was before the T-1000, that could have been really cool to have to pinpoint back this movie and say, oh my gosh, that's a terrorist from Die Hard 2. But you can't, because you can barely see him. A lot of people I know, when they mention Robert Patrick, they do not mention Die Hard 2. They did not get introduced to him from Die Hard 2. It's probably a hypothesis that he's the T-1000 solely because of Die Hard 2, with the way that he was able to play a convincing bad guy, to play a very convincing bad robot. But still, it would have been nice if that scene was longer so you could be able to clearly see who would eventually be the T-1000. But unfortunately, it wasn't just Robert Patrick that kind of got lost in this movie. There are two other famous actors that are present in this film that you don't really see them, and you kind of have to comb through to find them. One of them is Liev Schreiber, who we know from, I think he's on Ray Donovan. I believe he was in the very doomed X-Men Wolverine origin story. Great actor. Lost in the crowd in the airport. You have to really comb through to find him. Another one that you will not unfortunately find and only exist in the deleted scenes is John Leguizamo. John Leguizamo was really working his way up the ladder, and he was in various films, and before he became a funny man, he was damn good in action movies. He played a good bad guy. And he played one of the bad guys, but unfortunately his role went from lengthy to short to cut. Kind of sad, considering I would have liked to have seen him in the movie. It would have made it very longer, but he's one that I wouldn't have mind seeing because of the way he's able to do a very layered bad guy. In a way, I'm kind of sad about watching Die Hard. The first film, the second film, and of course, I'll watch the third film when it's about 4th of July time. But Bruce Willis, despite his reputation and his repertoire, he did change cinema forever. If it wasn't for him, the action genre would have been the same buff guys, military experience, and we actually got someone we wouldn't expect to be in an action movie and changed it forever. If it wasn't for him and everyone else that created Die Hard, we wouldn't have had Die Hard 2, we wouldn't have the sequels, and we wouldn't have the other various movies that followed the coattails of Die Hard. As much as the action is great, but it's the charm. It's been said that his character is the wrong guy at the wrong place at the wrong time. And that is basically the story of his life. But he still saved the day. He did what he could. He was one of our American heroes. He didn't really go for the pride or the glory. He wanted to save lives. He's an admirable character. And we wouldn't really have it if it wasn't for Bruce Willis. And it's kind of sad knowing we're never going to get another Die Hard film. We had as much as we did with all 5 of the films, And in a way, looking back at Die Hard 2, it's nice to see how the legacy kept going, that it was a film that people had no faith in, and it was given a sequel. And years later, there are some people that appreciate it, but it's not as appreciated as much as it should be, so it does make me wonder if it will get more recognition this year because of Bruce Willis's aphasia diagnosis. It was heartbreaking to have to hear about that, knowing that he was really suffering in his latter years, that he didn't know what was going on, he didn't know what he was doing. They had to revoke the 2021 Worst Bruce Willis Movies category because no one knew that it was the end of his career. He was suffering and he had to finally retire. But damn it, he gave us some great fucking movies. He was an amazing part of our culture. I'm talking about him as if he's like not here anymore, but still it's sad because he's not going to be prominent. He's got to take care of himself now, and all we really have are these movies. This is all we have left of John McClane, of Bruce Willis. And it's something to really recognize that he gave us something great. Die Hard 2 is a film that you take it for what it is. It does have some certain faults, but it is an enjoyable film. It was still doing something different to the action movie formula, and I gotta give credit for that. We do have a memorable performance from Bruce Willis. We got these little parts of the time capsule of the 90s where we got to see people playing bad guys that we wouldn't think would be bad guys. We got to have certain careers lifted up, which was great. It was a big resurgence for a lot of people, and that's kind of what it comes down to Die Hard 2, is it really did help a lot of careers. It may not be mentioned as much, but it's still recognized and it's still known. It's still going to be a part of that actor's legacy that they were a part of this film. And without Die Hard 2, how the hell will we get Die Hard with a Vengeance? And then the other two films, but that's okay. They did their job too. Hey, if it wasn't for Die Hard 2, we wouldn't have a lot of other different ways to create a very adventurous film. And of course, on top of that too, if it wasn't for Die Hard 2, then I wouldn't have my movie The Long Kiss Goodnight, and everyone knows how much I love that movie. I think what it comes down to for Die Hard 2 is, how can you not want to watch Die Hard 2? John McClane is such a lovable, enjoyable, crusty-cussy character. He's a character that you want to see more of, and you got to see more of his adventures, and you do get to see him save the day, but you never get tired of the way you do see him save the day. That's what makes Die Hard such an enjoyable series, well, the first three of them, I should say, knowing that he's your hero. He's going to save the day, and he always gets it done right before Christmas. So, this is a side note. It has absolutely nothing to do with Die Hard, but a promise is a promise. I attend a weekly gathering, open mic night at a local coffee house. And I've gotten to know a lot of the musical artists and some of the poets, and I got to talking with this lovely lady, and we were just conversing back and forth, and we were talking about my Grinch onesie that I was wearing because Christmas, and we were talking about social media, and I said, oh, here's my card, and then she had asked about my podcast, and I said, oh yeah, the Screen Queen, and her jaw dropped and went, you're the Screen Queen? I went, yep, and I had to do my little signature glasses pose, like, on the cover, like, having to validate my identity. Oh my goodness, and we had, like, the Step Brothers moment where we're like, did we just become best friends? It was absolutely amazing and magical to see that this show is going places, and to hear her stories about what episode she liked, and hearing her sister saying she loved the show too. To shout out to both of you, Alyssa James and Cheyenne. Thank you so much for being amazing supporters of the show, and I'll see you guys next Thursday. I hope you two enjoyed the show, and Merry Christmas to both of you. Well, that officially ends the Christmas series on the Screen Queen. I'm a little bit sad. I really enjoyed this series. This was nice to be able to talk about a few of my favorite movies, and I don't think I ever realized that a majority of them were, like, Christmas themed, so that was fun to be able to finally get to talk about that. So thank you so much for joining me on the show. And so as always, the next episode of the show is going to be random and we never know what it's going to be. However, that's for me to know and you to find out for once. I have a special episode planned for the first episode of the new year on The Screen Queen. Now, with that plot twist mentioned, I'm going to leave you guys in anticipation for the next episode on The Screen Queen. Until then, Merry Christmas and Yippie Kai Yay, motherfucker! Take care, everyone. Bye-bye!